debate. The Honourable Member for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Once again, it's always grateful to stand up and represent your constituents, my constituents of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. However, in this case, to represent all legal firearms owners, our law enforcement, our military, security forces around the country, even our parliamentary protective services, and I challenge every MP to go talk to them and ask their opinion about this bill, as well as sport shooters, hunters, and the opinion of the vast majority of my constituents in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. Madam Speaker, I'm disappointed that we're already curtailing debate on this important bill, especially considering we've only had 7 Conservative MPs speak to it, and that's only because we split our time. And on that note, Madam Speaker, I'll be splitting my time with the member from Brandon-Souris. I'm going to focus on 3 key aspects to my speech, Madam Speaker. Number 1, data and facts. Number 2, openness, transparency, and honesty. And finally, respect. And the key to all of this, Madam Speaker, and actually I think the key to everything to reducing gun violence in Canada is education. So let's speak to first the data and the facts, Madam Speaker. I asked the previous member speaking to define military-style assault rifles, a question I've been asking now for almost 3 years to this government. You know what, Madam Speaker? It doesn't exist. I've asked that question in a written question submitted to the government. What was their response? Please check the following commission report by Hilton Olden. You read that report, know what it says in that report, Madam Speaker? I think the government really needs to define what they mean by assault rifles or military-style assault rifles. So it doesn't exist, it still doesn't exist, and I think that adds to the confusion that so many Canadians face when we're trying to deal with such an important issue of reducing gun violence across Canada. To back up on this as well, to go back to originally the key piece of legislation in the last couple of years in the last Parliament around the Order in Council that banned 1,500 so-called military-style assault rifles. In that document, there's actually no definitions, no criteria for what determines or establishes a military-style assault rifle. When I asked the question of what were the criteria used, they said that there was none. They used 3 principles. Know what those 3 principles are, Madam Speaker? Number 1, that they're semi-automatic in nature with a high sustained rate of fire. Well, that statement's a contradiction unto itself. If it's semi-automatic, the rate of fire is controlled by the shooter, not by the firearm. So do you have a slow finger, you got a fast finger, that determines whether or not the firearm should be prohibited or not? So it doesn't even make logical sense. The second principle that they used, that they're of modern design. Again, I asked the question, what do you mean by modern design? Know what that is, Madam Speaker? Post-World War II. If the firearm was designed post the Second World War, we should be banning it. Number 3, that they exist in large quantity in Canada. Again, does not pass the common sense test. You have firearm X been used, there's 100,000 of them, let's say in Canada, been used in 0 gun crimes. Let's ban it. Firearm Z, there's only 10 of them in Canada, all 10 have been used in firearms crimes. Oh, it's good to go, we're not going to ban it. So again, there's no logic behind the principles, and there is no criteria to determine that list. So again, Madam Speaker, I've been asking for evidence, data that supports any of these firearms legislation that the current Liberal government's brought forward. I went back, I submitted a written question on the 29th of January 2020, or that's when I got the response, asking for any evidence or metrics behind how the government thinks any of this legislation is actually going to reduce gun violence. That response, Madam Speaker, I could read it out. It'd only take me 30 seconds. There is no evidence or metrics on how this is going to reduce gun violence in Canada. I asked how the government, member from Winnipeg North stood up and said, this has been broadly consulted. Hasn't been consulted in my riding. I know on the previous Parliament, the Minister of Public Safety at the time came to my community, talked about Bill C-71 in the 42nd Parliament, and I can guarantee he walked out of there, and there wasn't a single person that talked to the minister during that consultation session that supported Bill C-71. So let's get, again, back to my point around Data. Where is the data that show legal firearms owners are responsible for gun crime in Canada? I talked about education. One of the first things I did, Madam Speaker, even though I spent 25 years in uniform carrying all sorts of restricted and prohibited firearms because I could as a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, as an infantry officer, walked around with a fully automatic firearm, which that is what an assault weapon is, a fully automatic, which have been banned in Canada since 1977. I carried my last 2 deployments in Afghanistan and in Iraq, walked around everywhere with a handgun. Handguns don't kill people. People kill people. And to get to the point about the education side, despite all that, when I got out of uniform and became a civilian, I actually had to take the possession and acquisitions license and the restricted possession and acquisition license, the PAL and the RPAL, in order to potentially buy a firearm or a restricted firearm. Those courses are extensive. Did I learn a lot about safety on those specific firearms? No, Madam Speaker. I was safe. I had no problem passing the practical portions of both those tests, both those courses, but I did learn a lot about our laws. As I suggested in the last Parliament, it would benefit every member that wants to sit here and debate firearms legislation to go out and do the PAL or the RPAL courses, because it would teach you a lot about what our current very restrictive firearms laws that currently exist in Canada are. To continue on the education portion, Madam Speaker, when I was door knocking in 2019, I had similar concerns that have been addressed by other speakers or during the debate here about why would anybody need that firearm. And they showed me a picture in a Cabela's or I don't know, some magazine that they had received in the mail. And they said, why would anybody need that? I looked at that, I compared it to another firearm that was in the brochure. I said, that firearm that you think's so scary, I said, I'll go walk 200 meters down the street. I'll stand there and you can shoot at me all you want. I'm not even gonna move. See that firearm? Is that one okay? Yeah, that's just a hunting rifle. I'm not gonna stand there. If I'm standing another few hundred meters past, farther up, as soon as you start shooting at me with that firearm, I'm taking cover, because again, it's the lack of education to understand firearms just because they look scary doesn't mean they're more dangerous. It's based on the capabilities and criteria. I asked the minister when he first put Bill C-21 on the table here just last week, Madam Speaker, about handguns in particular. As I mentioned earlier in my speech, handguns are restricted and they are registered. So I just asked a simple question. It's easy for law enforcement to track how many gun crimes. How many gun crimes in Canada have been committed by legal firearms owners with legal handguns? He refused to answer that question, Madam Speaker. It's the same question I'd asked his officials the week prior during the technical brief. And again, please just get us the data, Madam Speaker. It would help so much. I would point out restricted firearms owners are the most law-abiding demographic in Canada. In fact, they are 3 times less likely to commit a crime than the average Canadian, and I would argue they're a lot less, it's even less likely than that for the majority of the Liberal caucus. Openness and transparency, Madam Speaker. Again, I think that's the key piece around all of this. Let's talk and debate this. Everybody wants to reduce gun violence in Canada, but we need to do that based on data, based on evidence, based on statistics. Law enforcement demands this. One of the things that a lot of Canadians don't understand, our law enforcement or security depend on these restricted firearms for their own safety and training. They don't get the time on the range to do this. So a lot of our legal firearms owners are law enforcement that own these firearms on their own. I get Bill C-21 specifically with handguns talks about that they'd still be able to own them. But let's remove the politicization around this and let's talk about what's important to solve this. My final points on respect and trust, Madam Speaker. Let's respect parliamentarians in this House. Let's respect legal firearms owners, and let's most of all respect Canadians by talking about the real key facts. So, Madam Speaker, in conclusion, data and facts, openness and transparency, respect and trust. Let's educate Canadians on the root causes of gun violence in Canada, i.e. crime, drugs, illegal trafficking of firearms, and most importantly, poverty, vice going after law-abiding Canadians, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader. Senate.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I would like to pick up on some of the closing comments from this member where he said, let's respect parliamentarians, let's respect the process, let's respect Parliament. But you wouldn't know that coming from the way this member has been acting and his colleagues have been acting in the House over the last several months, literally on bills that they support that are in their election platform, they're refusing to let go through this House. The member talks about the limited amount of time that people have been able to speak to this bill. Has he had the opportunity to reflect on how much more time he would have had the Conservatives not been up to procedural games on delaying bills like the fall economic statement to provide more supports to Canadians? Had they actually let that stuff go through like it should have gone through fairly easy, he would have had so much more time to speak to this and other bills that the Conservatives are genuinely passionate about.
Honourable Member for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Madam Speaker, look, I'm not going to even really provide a dignified response to that because the fact of the matter is every member of Parliament should be able to speak to every bill at every stage if it means something to their constituents, because that's why we're here. We're here to represent our constituents, and if there's Conservative members of Parliament, if there's Liberal backbenchers, in fact, it'd be nice if that member or the member from Winnipeg North would actually let somebody else in the Liberal caucus speak. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary on a point of order.
As a point of privilege, what is the member impugning when he says that I'm not allowing other people to speak? To suggest that I am suspending other people's democratic opportunities, I mean, he's implying that I am suppressing other people's ability to speak, Madam Speaker.
Indeed, and we should not in any way make those kinds of accusations. I would invite the honourable member to perhaps reflect on the comments. We should not be assigning intentions to other members, and I would really appreciate it if the honourable member would withdraw the comment.
I'll withdraw that comment.
Thank you. Honorable député de Rivière-du-Nord, la Rivière-des-Millets.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci à mon collègue pour son discours. Il sait que je l'apprécie beaucoup. On a passé 12 jours en mission il n'y a pas longtemps. Je l'ai adoré. On a eu des discussions fantastiques, mais ça a été un débat constant, les armes à feu. On ne s'entend pas là-dessus, donc c'est ainsi. Moi, j'aimerais savoir ce qu'il pense de la proposition du Bloc québécois qui en est de créer une liste des organismes des groupes plutôt, dans nos villes qui créent de la merde en tirant à gauche et à droite. Alors, nous voudrions une liste, comme il existe une liste d'organismes antiterroristes, terroristes plutôt.
The Honourable Member for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Merci, Madame Présidente, pour cette question de mon collègue, le député honorable, que j'ai beaucoup de respect pour lui. Look, I have no issues with lists of criminal organizations right across this country. The challenge I have in my riding, like a lot of rural ridings, is how do you quantify that, get down to it, etc. But I have no issues with criminal organizations being listed. I think that's all important information law enforcement should have. And in fact, if that can help, because I think that really gets to the root causes of gun violence in this Canada. It's the illegal crime, the illegal gangs. Let's fix that, Madam Speaker.
Questions et commentaires. Questions and comments. The Honourable Member. Oops, my God. Sorry. The Honourable Member for Edmonton. Calgary Skyview. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank my colleague for bringing forward the speech. Lots to disagree with there. I spent a number of years on a public safety task force, chairing it in the city of Calgary, talking about guns and gangs and gun violence, and also I was a member of the Police Commission in Calgary. My colleague talked about data, using data and the data on gun crimes. In Western Canada, in Calgary, it was identified that the majority of guns used in a crime were obtained through legal means, through legal purchases and ownership. So I'd like to ask my colleague, knowing that data point, what can we do to make sure that those legally obtained guns aren't used in a crime? That's the majority of guns provided by the Calgary Police Service last year at the Calgary Police Commission. What can we do to prevent that from happening? And what would you want in this bill or in other bills to make sure that guns and guns owner rights are...
I have to give the honourable member the opportunity to answer. Honourable member for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Yeah, look, Madam Speaker, my first question, let's provide that data. I'd love to see. Please email me that data because that data has not been tabled. I've been asking for this government to table any data around firearms crime that has been committed by legal firearms owners or by legal firearms, and they refuse to table that and bring it forward. And I guess the best bet, I'll go back to a previous speech, Madam Speaker, and the amendment, which is what we're actually debating here. Let's refer this whole study to the Committee of Public Safety and deal with it there. Then we can bring back legislation that actually makes sense and that's informed, not just based on political divide.
Resuming debate. The